discussion? Well, we are discussing about additional practice for submarines, isn't it? Now, here you have 5 passages, and on the basis of that, 3 passages comes with some subjective-based question, and all these 5 passages have come up with the thing of summary, right? And that's the region for which you will find out about the summary. Like when we talk about summaries, what summaries are all about? When you talk about summaries are nothing but a concise, succinct, or a brief information about the original context. Right? Now, in that case, it makes us realize that we don't need to write everything that are given in the passage. We need to write those of the relevant points, the points which are considered as the main ideas and subordinate ideas from the passage. It means the passage is generally covers with the situation or a statement, and on the basis of that situation or statement, the author elaborates or expands the idea. With it, he provides or she provides some kind of regions and examples, and finally he gives a suggestion or conclusion. Right? So in between he puts lots of relevant or irrelevant details. In this case, our focus would be what? Our summary must be what 1/3 of the original text. Right? If the text is 500 or 700 words, then our summary must be that 15 to 16 words or 70 words. Isn't it? A small packet. Second, it's called as when we go for the passage. So we need to restrict ourselves with the idea that the author has provided. We shall not put our own judgment, own opinion, own inference, right? So what we can do, we can write or paraphrase the information into very short, right? So the lengthy words or the lengthy sentence would be made short or shorter, right? And we need to jot down the main ideas or the key ideas, the best essence of the passage, subordinate ideas, and we need to be careful about the examples that not be put in our summary. At the same time, some of the analogy, if the quoted information are given, we will not put in the summary. We will write them in our own way, right, so that it makes us understandable, right? I shall not put any kind of a jargon terms so that it looks complicated, right? To the others as well as means when we also read, we shall understand that. Isn't it? That's what. And the purpose of summary is nothing but to remember the lengthy passage in a very short way. Isn't it? Let's look at some of the examples. The first passage, which is indicating about Sachin's wings, right? So we find out that some questions are there. We will first discuss some questions and then we go for the text or the summary of it. So the first one, what does it say? Sachin's wings seem almost immutable. Immutable means unchanged, right? So when viewed from afar, these planetary jewels carved by moonlights and shaped by gravity could well have looked much the same now as they did millions of years ago, but only from afar. So in that case, the author wanted to say that the kind of appearance of this Saturn's wings appear like what? Planetary jewels, right? And they have not changed a million of years ago, right? As far as means looking from the million of years starting to so far, right? They have not changed. Now it is emerging that an event around 25 years ago dramatically disrupted the rings. But at the same time, the author has given a kind of a fact. 25 years ago, dramatically disrupted. There was a kind of a disruption occurred in rings. But that doesn't mean referring to the change, right? So there is no change. Okay. So we'll discuss all these things and then after we go for it. And all our telescopes and spacecrafts missed it. This mysterious event suddenly wrapped planets in remote rings into a rich spiral plateau, like the groups on a wibbly record. The latest images reveal that the perturbation is so vast that only a profound change to the planet can have caused it. The first hint that Saturn's rings had been perturbed came in 2006 from NSS Cassini spacecraft, which took pictures of the planets in a motion. A tense icy band called the G-ring. Cassini found alternating light and dark bands that suggested the ring was not perfectly flat, but was composed of groups about a kilometer in amplitude. Infrequent or caused by these strange ripples, Matthew Hedman of Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, proposed an explanation. He built simulations that started with a simple assumption that something had made the reading slightly away from the plane of Saturn's equator, perhaps a comet or asteroid. Now, this is something called as a kind of assumption, right? So, assumption of which question? Then the question is the Saturn's ring that had been dramatically disrupted or perturbed that came in 2006 from NASA or 25 years ago. Isn't it? So the solution or the kind of assumption is what? Now something which is known as a comet or asteroid means might the region of creating perturbed or called as disturbances to this what do we say that the planetary journeys. Isn't it? So after that, since Saturn is not a perfect sphere, its gravity would pull unevenly on the tidal G-ring, so that the ring ovals over time relative to the planet, a bit like a spinning coin coming to rest. What's more, motions of the ring close to Saturn, where gravity is stronger, but oval faster than parts further away. This difference in oval rates would eventually create a spiraling pattern of ridges and throat. Hedman and colleagues were able to unveil the spiraling formation back in time to 1984, the point when the initial tilting of the G-ring occurred. The bad news is that this date was more than 2 years after the Voyager space group took a close peek at the blue band of planet, and long before the Hubble Space Telescope came online or Cassini arrived. Right. The latest Cassini images deepen the mystery. They show the groups are much more widespread than previously thought. In August, Saturn was oriented so that the Sun illuminated the rings almost edging, which means that even the most subtle features produced prominent shadows. This revealed that Saturn's mass steering, the next ring out from the G-ring, also has groups. The steering is about 70,000 kilometers wide from its inner to outer edge, which is more than twice the width of the T-ring. Though the C-ring ridge pattern is less dramatic with an amplitude of 100 meters or less, such widespread collision probably roots out a rock of cometary line. It's really hard to do with one object, said Hedman, who presented the results at a meeting of the American Astronomical Society's Division for Planetary Science, Poetry. One possible scenario is that a body much larger than a typical asteroid raced and pulled on the rings, or a gravity change in weather might have shifted Saturn's gravity. If a band of clouds on the planet somehow sped up and were inclined to the equator, for example, it might move recently, allowing more mass to accumulate there. The trouble is everything you come up with seems intrinsically unlikely, says Mark Shorter of the Setting Institute in Mountain View, California. It will require more observation and modeling to completely unravel Saturn's spiral mystery. So the mystery is still there, right? So in that case, we can talk about the whole passes. Main idea is what Saturn ring, which is nothing but appearing like planetary jewels. So there is a kind of disruption that has been found, and it has on the basis of the scientists, right? So they realize that it must be or it might be a cause of what comet or asteroid that create the disturbance. But the problem is called as earlier many of the you will find out many of the cameras that tried to identify what was the region but they are able to find out. But later, they were one of the camera that able to, or telescope that able to find out, able to find out that what was the region of it, isn't it? Now, coming to the question, the first question, but that's again called as a chemical mystery. They are also not mentioned. Question number 1. Saturn's ring have remained unchanged over millions of years. No, right? As we find out from the first paragraph itself, that it is clearly stated, they have looked much the same now as they did millions of years ago. Right? So there is no change. So question 2. Saturn's spiral mystery has been unraveled satisfactorily by scientists. No, as for the last paragraph, where it is clearly stated that the trouble is everything you come with seems intrinsically unlikely. Mark Shorter of the SETI Institute in Mountain View, California, and it will require more observation and modeling to completely reveal Saturn's spiral mystery. Isn't it? That makes the sense that Saturn's spiral mystery has not been unraveled, right? Satisfactorily by scientists. 3. The tilting of the D is thought to be one of the factors that caused the ring to oval and then create the groups. Yes. So why this? Because if you look at the 4th and 5th paragraph, the tilting of the D is thought to be one of the factors that caused the ring to oval and then create the groups. So the question makes us that D ring is possibly the region of there is a kind of oval and also creating groups, right? But if I observe 4th and 5th paragraph, what does it say? Intricate by the strange symbols, Matthew Hedman of Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, proposed an explanation in built simulation that started with the simple assumption that something had tilted the T, right, slightly away from the plane of Saturn's equator, perhaps a comet or asteroid. Now that makes the sense that bleeding is thought to be one of the factors that cause the bleeding. No, so even bleeding itself is also, means you can say appearing like floating in the gravity or pulling unevenly on the tilted beam. So, and the scientists assume that what it must be, or it might be, means comet or asteroid, right? Because he gave in the 5th paragraph, since Saturn is not a perfect sphere, right, its gravity would pull unevenly on the tilted area, so that the ring ovals over time related to the planet, a bit like a spinning coin coming to rest. Right. What's more, motion of the ring close to Saturn, where gravity is stronger, that would oval faster than parts further away. This difference in oval rates will eventually create a spiraling pattern of ridges and tropes. Isn't it? Am I clear? So question 3 would be what? Yes. Right. Question number 4. It can be inferred that both the Hubble Space Telescope and the Cassini spacecraft probably missed the groups in the ceiling. Yes. It can be inferred. You draw. What did you draw? That both the Hubble Space Telescope and the Cassini spacecraft possibly missed the group in the ceiling. Right? How? Look at the scene. 6th number paragraph, where it is clearly stated, Hedman and Kelly were able to unveil. Unveil means uncover the spiraling formation back in time of 1984. Right? So the point when the initial tilting of the dealing occurred, the bad news is that this date was more than 2 years after the Voyager space probes took a close peek as they viewed by the planet, and long before the Hubble Space Telescope came online for Cassini arrived. So, what do you mean by that? The latest Cassini images deepen the mystery. They show that the groups are much more widespread than previously thought. So, what do you find out? Now, the latest Cassini images deepen the mystery, and they show groups are much more widespread. So, it means Cassini images identify that, right? It can be inferred that both the Hubble Space Telescope and the Cassini spacecraft probably missed the group in the ceiling, right? So it means latest stage called as a Cassini revealed that mystery.
They missed it and then later.
Then later they identified. No, in earlier what happened, they missed it, right? So in that case, because after that also it is written, they show the groups are much more widespread than previously thought. In August, Sachin was oriented so that the sun illumined the range almost edge, which means that even the most small features produced prominent Sachins. This revealed the Sachin's fast seeding, right? This revealed that Sachin's fast seeding. The next string out from the DD also has groups. The seeding is about 17,000 km wide from its inner to outer range, which is more than twice of the width of the DD. So that is what identified Cassini image. But when the latest Cassini image, right? So the next one is called as scientists are fairly sure that the groups were caused because of an impact from an asteroid or comet. Scientists are fairly sure. No, they are not sure. Because last two paragraphs point out that, isn't it? Okay. Coming to the then summary of it. Right. Now, what have you understood from this? If you see that what the summary would be what we can clearly identify from this that Sachin's rings appear to be as they were millions of years ago. Right? We are not going to compare with that jewelry. Right. So that's again called as extra information. Right. So what we need to write, those are the things which are important. Right. So first thing is called as Sachin's ring appear to be as they were millions of years ago. A closer examination shows that about 25 years ago, the rings developed what? A raised spiral pattern. That is the second point. In 2006, NASA's Cassini spacecraft took picture that showed that the innermost ring called the D had grooves about a kilometer, right? In amplitude, the explanation proposed was that a comet or asteroid might have tilted the ring, isn't it? Now, because that's what is the scientists draw or assume such a not being a perfect sphere. The uneven pull of its gravity caused the D-ring to open and the groups to be formed. Then it was found at the C-ring, right? So it's indicating about D-ring, C-ring. So the one next to the D-ring and twice as wide also had groups, a body larger than an asteroid or a change in weather. Weather could be the culprit, but Sachin's spirals are still a mystery. Right? Sachin's spiral are still a mystery. Now in that case, you can find out that this is nothing but a short summary, which is clearly indicating about Sachin's ring, right? How they appear, right? So, and it lies in a particular place for how many years, and then we talk about the kind of a disturbance that occurred to the Sachin's ring. So what are the things that occur to the disturbed, right? So that is called as a seeding and dealing, and what are the scientists' assumption on it? So they blame to comet or asteroid, right? So but later you find out that not only dealing but also seeding also get disturbed. So when we talk about seeding is as wide as, so more wide than or wider than dealing, and that also you can say tilted, and that tilted because of the what means gravity, right? So which is nothing but pulling it, right? And for which that may be the region of dealings group or called as tilted, right? Or not. So, but again called as the scientists are not sure about it, even though they found out in certain pictures, isn't it? So that is what nothing but called as the main idea out of this text. Am I clear? Did you write the same? Okay. So next, coming to the second passage. So when we talk about second passage, what do we find out? It's again called as a climate related, isn't it? So that one is the you would find out geography and astronomy, right? But climate related. When you talk about this particular passage, what do we draw? For 2 winters running, an Arctic chill has descended on Europe, burning that continental snow and ice. Last year in the United States, distributed blizzards afflicted the mid-Atlantic region. This winter, the Deep South has endured unusual snowstorms and severe cold, and the frigid northeast is bracing for what could shape into another major snowstorm this week. Yet, while people in Atlanta learn to shovel snow, the weather 2,000 miles to the north has been freakishly warm the past 2 winters. Throughout northeastern Canada and Greenland, temperatures in December ran as much as 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. Bays and lakes have been slow to freeze, ice fishing, hunting and trade routes have been disrupted. The immediate cause of the drastic weather is clear enough. A pattern of atmospheric circulation that tends to keep frigid air pent in the Arctic has weakened during the last 2 winters, allowing big tongues of cold air to descend far to the south, while masses of warmer air have moved north. The deeper issue is whether this pattern is linked to the rapid changes that global warming is causing in the Arctic, particularly the drastic loss of sea ice. At least 2 prominent climate scientists have offered theories suggesting that it is, but others are doubtful, saying the recent events are exceptional or that more evidence over a long period would be needed to establish a link. Since satellites began tracking it in 1979, the ice on the Arctic Ocean surface in the bellwether month of September has declined by more than 30%. It is the most striking change in the terrain of the planet in recent decades, and a major question is whether it is starting to have an effect on route patterns. Ice reflects the sunlight, and scientists say the loss of ice is causing the Arctic Ocean to absorb more heat in the summer. A handful of scientists point to that extra heat as a possible culprit in the recent harsh winters in Europe and the United States. Their theories involve a fast-moving river of air called the jet stream that circles the north hemisphere. Many winters, a strong pressure difference between the polar region and the middle latitude channels the jet stream into a tight circle or vortex around the North Pole, effectively containing the freezing air at the top of the water. When that pressure difference diminishes, however, the jet stream weakens the metered southward, bringing warm air into the Arctic and cold air into the mid-latitude. Exactly what had happened the last couple of winters. The effect is sometimes compared to leaving a refrigerator door open, with cold air flooding the kitchen even as warm air enters the refrigerator. This has happened intermittently for many decades. Still, it is unusual for the polar vortex to weaken as much as it has lately. Last winter, one index related to the vortex hit its lowest winter time value since record keeping began in 1865, and it was quite low again in December. James Overland, a climate scientist with NOAA in Seattle, has proposed that the extra warmth in the Arctic Ocean could be heating the atmosphere enough to make it less dense, causing the air pressure over the Arctic to be closer to that of the middle latitude. The ardent heat works against having a strong polar vortex, he said. Right. So as we talk about this particular text, so the particular text talks about the climate, right? And if you talk about that, what we can find out here, let's go for the kind of a summary of it, right? And then we will go for the discussion of the questions. So you can say that the passage tries to discuss about the last 2 winters, right? So, and what does the author point out? That how the last 2 winters have been extremely harsh in Europe, right? Not only Europe but also in the US, right? Europe and the US. At the same time, we also find out Canada and Greenland, which are also given, right? And they have had higher temperature. If you talk about winters in US and Europe, so at the same time the higher temperature in December. So this where you can say Canada and Greenland, right? And this erratic climate is possibly because a vortex of air. Because of what? A vortex of air, right? So that acts like a fence. Fence, you understand? That called as a barrier. That acts like a fence and keeps the cold on the Arctic area, right? So that has weakened, allowing tons of cold air to descend down while warm air moves north side, right? So scientists are not sure whether this is the result of global warming, right? Global warming causing ice in the Arctic to melt, right? Or which is 30% less in September as compared to a couple of decades ago. So the weakening of the vertex could be due to a reduction in the pressure differential between the Arctic and the mid latitudes, isn't it? So that is what the thing about the summary of it. Let's go to the question. So what does the question point out here? Yeah. So the first question, whether conditions in the northern hemisphere have been erratic in winter in the last couple of years? Yes or no? Yes. Right. Because of the paragraph 1 and 2 that points out. So we can say that yes, conditions of the northern hemisphere have been very erratic in winter in the last couple of years that we did in the summer. 7. Global warming is the reason for any aberration in weather? No. Right. So good. Question number 8. The weakening of the polar vortex may be due to the greater warming of the Arctic region. Yes. So that we find out in the last paragraph. Right. The weakening of the polar vortex may be due to the greater warming of the Arctic region, where it is clearly stated in the last paragraph where he pointed. James E. Overland, a climate scientist, Noah Sitson, has proposed that the extra warmth in the Arctic Ocean could be heating the atmosphere enough to make it less dense, causing the air pressure over the Arctic to be closer to that of the middle latitude. The ardent heat works against having a strong polar vortex inside. So he used the term called as could be heating the atmosphere enough to make a less dense, causing the air pressure over the Arctic to be closer to that of the middle latitudes. Right? Okay, question number 9. When the jet stream weakens, warm air moves south while cold air moves north. No. Right. Good. Question number 10. Difference in pressure between the Arctic and the mid-latitude region helps to keep the vortex of air tight around the polar region. Yes. As for the passage 7. So, difference in pressure between the Arctic and the mid-latitude region helps to keep the vortex of air tight around the polar region. Okay. Any further question? No. So, have you done the summary of this particular passage? Good. Next. So, let's go to the passage 3. What does it say? The liberty that makes economic integration possible is a desirable except in addition. You did correct. Let me just give you the summary of this passage 3, right? So that you can understand this. So, what does the passage point out? Let's read this. The liberty that makes economic integration possible is desirable in itself. In addition, advocates of globalization argue integration is good for people in natural terms. Right. So that is why three people chose it. Skeptics disagree on both points. Globalization militates against the liberty and democracy. They say and while it makes some people who are already rich even richer, It does this by keeping the poor in poverty. After all, globalization is mainly capitalism writ large. First, is it true that globalization harms the poor? Now, this is the question from which the whole text begins, and in which you would find out the two types of people, right? People who further side and people who are means against of it. So you can say skeptics and common people, right? Now, in a narrow sense, the answer is yes, right? Yes. What is that? Globalization harms the poor. How? It does harm some of the poor. Free trade and foreign FDI, that's called as foreign direct investment, which is known as FDI, may take jobs from workers, right, including low-paid workers in the advanced industrial economies, and give them to cheaper workers in poor countries, right? Like people who move from one country to the other country. Then recently you heard the kind of news from the Kuwait, how 41 people died. So they are from India, right? So skeptics quote this strategy as a double crime. The rich country workers who were probably on low wages by local standards to begin with are out of work. That increase in the local supply of labor drives down other wages. Meanwhile, the poor country workers are drawn into jobs that exploit them because they have been paid less, often much less than the rich country counterparts got before trade opened up, and in all likelihood they are working longer hours in shabbier premises as well. So it's not only the kind of payment structure, it's also called as the condition they want. Right. So the only thing from this kind of a trade accrues to the owner of the companies who have shifted their operation from low-wage factories in the industrialized countries to poverty-based factories in the south. Some of this is true. Trade displaces workers in the industrial countries. Other things being equal, this will have some depressing effect on the wages of other workers and pay and conditions in developing country factories are likely to be worse than in their rich country counterparts. But whereas the displaced rich country workers are plainly worse off than they were before, the newly employed poor country workers are clearly better off. They must be, because they have chosen to take those jobs. As for profits, yes, that is the spur for moving production to a lower wage area, but no company can expect to hang on to this windfall for long, because it will be competed away as other companies do the same thing and cut their prices. It is what makes consumers at large, including poor consumers, better off, raising real incomes in the aggregate. What about the rich country workers who are not displaced, but whose wages may nonetheless come under downward pressure? It is difficult to generalize. On the one hand, their wages may fall or fall to rise as quickly as they would have done otherwise. On the other, they benefit from lower prices along with everybody else. On balance, you would expect that some will lose, some will gain, and some will be about as well off as they were before. In developing countries, the labor market to the side of this process will tend to work in the other direction. The increase in demand for poor country labor required to push up wages even for workers who are not employed in the new trade-related jobs. So capitalism globalization is not mainly concerned with shifting income from workers to investors, as the skeptics mentioned. Rather, it makes some workers worse off while making others, including the poorest ones of all to begin with, better off. And in the aggregate, it makes consumers, that is, people with or without a job, better off as well. Right? Now, in that case, if you observe, what do we find out? We find out that means the summary of the text is indicating what? While the supporters of globalization, right, who believe it is good for people of what? Now going abroad, working there. So, but skeptics think that it favors the rich people, right? So, whereas the supporters of globalization, what do they believe? That going abroad, working and working for the industry, so that will definitely develop the globalization and people. But at the same time, skeptics believe that it is only for the beneficial or it is only benefiting to whom? That called as a rich people, because rich are becoming richer, right? At the expense of the poor, right? So globalization allows to move on to the third world we find out? Making workers in developed countries, so what developed countries poorer, right or not? So the workers in poor countries overexploited at lower wages and poorer working conditions, right? So the supporters claim workers in poor countries are better off. Workers in poor countries are better off. Further, you could also find out further that manufacturing cost, lower prices, and benefits of the wholesome are benefited while others are not. Wholesome are benefited. The whole, you can say that some are benefited and while others are not getting benefited. So it is not a question of benefiting, it is the question of what the rich over the poor, right? So in the manner of what given free trade, the standard of living improves in all countries. Given free trades, right, that helps to the what the standard of living improve in all countries. So that is what you find out. The whole text is all about. Right. Now let's put the question number 11 to 16. What does it say? Globalization benefits some workers at the expense of the others. Globalization benefits some workers at the expense of the others. Yes, right? So, because if you read the first two lines of the last paragraph, where it is stated, capitalism globalization is not mainly concerned with shifting income from workers to investors, as the skeptics mentioned. Rather, it makes some workers worse off, right, while making others better. In the aggregate, it makes consumers better off as well, right? So in that case, if you say globalization benefits some, whereas at the expense of the others, right or not? So rich becomes richer, or means you can say that rich power over poor. So 12. Skeptics mention that globalization hurts workers in both developed and poor countries. Yes, right? Why? Because in developed countries, right, they are getting paid less, right, and even they are going into the bad condition, right. In poorer countries, you would find out when poor people are better off, living in a better situation. But once they sit, right, their situation are getting worse, right. So in that case, if you talk about developed and poor countries, where you find out means poor are becoming poorer and living in a worse condition. 13. According to the supporters, globalization is to be valued for the freedom it offers rather than look for material benefit. According to the supporters, globalization is to be valued for the freedom it offers rather than look for material benefit. Look at the paragraph 1. So the liberty that makes economic integration possible is desirable in itself. In addition, advocates for, you can say, advocates of globalization argue. Advocates mean supporters of globalization argue integration is good for people, right? In material terms, right? Now, here it is stated what? Globalization is to be valued for the freedom it offers rather than look for material benefit. But it is called the material benefit, which is something which is good for people. That is what supporters stated or argued. That is why three people chose it. So skeptics disagree, right? So in that case, you can say option it will be no, right? So 14, profit is not the motive for moving production to poor countries. No, profit is the reason, right? So as far as if we talk about the para 5, you can find out in the first sentence it is clearly stated as per profit, yes, that is the spot, right, for moving production to a lower wage area. Isn't it? So clearly stated, it's a direct question. 15. Advocates of globalization maintain that it benefits all through competing and lowering of prices. Yes, right. As for the paragraph 5, we find out that. Yes. Let's go to the passage 4. Have you done important passage for you? Okay, let me just give you the short summary of it, not to read the whole text. So what this text is all about, the text is about Eva Hoffman's book Time, isn't it? So which is an attempt to what? Explore the intricacies of time, right? So revealing that our interaction with time has changed, right? Changed to what? Societies have become obsessed with the time. So Huffing looks at how people treat time and try to manipulate it. She believes that what? People change the relationship to time, right? So and that is what nothing but called as a paradigm shift. Right? Means according to the time you change your relationship. Right? So and but this could be an exaggeration. Right? Exaggeration means called as excessive. Right? Burn of a passion for the subject. So means you can say that Eva Hoffman own childhood was regional, but she is not opposed to the American. Right? American tempo or called as a temperament. Right? So to knowing time's words, she is a connoisseur of time, trying to understand it. So she is a connoisseur of time. So what do you mean by connoisseur of time? That's called as experts. Experts in a particular subject. So she is an expert of what? Time. And what she tries to do, she tries to understand the time. Isn't it? Okay. Let's go to the, it doesn't have the question, so we'll move to the last passage, right? Passage 5. Have you done that? Okay. So let's look at the text. So what does it say? Imagine that you are almost unimaginably small, no bigger than a water molecule. For example, which is very small indeed. There are more molecules of water in a glass of water than glasses of water in all the oceans. Right? You are so small that you can enter unnoticed into one of the billions of cells that make up the human body, science related. Right? As you approach the cell, you will see enormous and huge, and as you get closer, you see that it is enclosed by a membrane. Right? So you see small openings in the membranes through which you could pass, and special ones for favored molecules. There are also exist to crack. For example, sodium is continuously found out. So entering to one of the openings in the fatty membrane surrounding the cell, you find yourself in the interior. Here there is an extraordinary crowded world of millions of molecules, proteins, which are the workers in the cell, and also some sugars and fats, all moving around with extraordinary rapidity. There are also many membranes folded together, and filaments and microtubules. The filaments and tubules are formed from proteins joining up to make long chains. It gives you the feeling that by comparison, being an enormous football crowd is like being alone. It seems like chaos, but it is not. The thousands of different proteins are rushing about finding out what work they have to do. The proteins made from amino acids look like complex twisted chains. They have extraordinary shapes, and some are facing or acting like machines, cutting up some molecules and constructing others. In doing this, they change their shape rather like contortionists. You also see some tiny particles being moved across the cell by motor proteins using fine tubules as railway tracks. Of particular importance is the protein synthesis, in which messengers from the gene determine that the amino acid building blocks are joined together in the right order. These are joined together one at a time into long chains, which fold to give the proteins their complete shape. The energy for much of this activity is provided by the local energy currency, adenosine triphosphate, commonly known as ATP, which floats around water waiting to be spent. Lots of ATP is pouring out of large sources and cylinders. These are the mitochondria where the ATP is made using the energy from burning glucose. As you move further into the cell, you see the membrane around the cell nucleus, has entrances and niches for special molecules. When you enter the nucleus, you see a set of very long thick fibers, the chromosomes that contain the DNA of the genes. In some regions there is activity. The genes are being read by a protein machine to make meshes for constructing other proteins. A gene is passive and does nothing while its code for the protein is being read. As you move along the chromosome, you see that there are thousands of genes. A little bewildered by now, you are beginning to get some idea of just how complex the machinery is of a single cell. But the single cell is the basis of all life, and in each of the bodies we have billions of them. Now, if you observe that the passage is taken from the science, right? Second is called as it tells about the human structure. It also tells about what are the things present in the human being or human's body. So it tells about the cell, it tells about the membrane, it tells about the gene, isn't it? All such kind of things. So, but if you look into the main idea of the text, so the text begins with the what? A kind of a condition that what? If you were transfer a heater molecule, a cell would appear huge, right? So if you were as small as a heater molecule cell would appear huge. You could enter it through an opening in the fatty membrane, right? So enclosing it. Then there are millions of molecules inside. You would find out as also filaments and microtubules, right? So what are things that you find out in cell? You would find out when it's fatty membrane, enclosing it, and there are millions of molecules inside, as also filaments and microtubules. Though it appears chaotic means confusion, right? So a lot of work is being done. The energy for the activity comes from ATP, right? So what is ATP? Artificial adenosine triphosphate, right? Adenos means adenosine triphosphate, which is given in the fourth paragraph, first line, right? Commonly known as ATP, right? So you would find out that so the energy for the activity comes from ATP and which is made from glucose, right? The cell molecule is covered in a membrane. Cell molecule is covered in a membrane. Inside are the chromosomes containing what? DNA, right? So of the gene, there are thousands of genes, right? The genes are made by what? A protein machine for making other proteins, right? The cell is therefore complex and forms the basis of life. So there are millions of them in our body. Now, what did you understand? You understand about the passages stating about means taken from the science and discussing about the human body, and specifically it tells about the cell, right? And it begins with the what? Means the author stated that if you are a molecule, then the cell appears means huge to you. And what are the things that you find out in cell? Right, that's something called as millions of molecules inside. Second is called as a filament, microtubules, right? So everything is given, and even you would also find out means how cell is working a lot of work, and you would find out that the energy that comes from the glucose, right, and how the cell molecule is covered with the membrane, and inside are the chromosomes and DNA, right, gene of the gene. So like that you also find out there are thousands of genes, isn't it? So and the genes are read by protein machine for making other proteins, isn't it? So the cell is therefore considered as the complex and it is the main part of the life, right? So there are millions of them in our life, isn't it? So I hope you understood all the passages and the summary of it. So have you read that? Have you written the same? Yeah. So the thing is that you need to focus with the summary and try to why do summary present here or in the class, because you need to focus on your reading section a lot, reading comprehension, and how you can enhance that means like in the class you find out the passage, you read and do the questions. It's more important that what means when you go for the any kind of a text, first you try to understand what this passage is all about. Let me first read it, and after closing it, I'll write a short summary of it. So that if you do that practice again and again, then it becomes a kind of an exercise in your mind. And when you read it, you start means remembering the text. Right? Generally, that is what the problem among the students when they read the passage. So they forget what they read in the first, and they lost in the last. Isn't it? So it is a kind of exercise that you're supposed to do every day. Right? That helps you. Second thing is called when you read the passage, always try to remember the first paragraph, and that there you are supposed to give your 50% time. Right? So because if you understood the first paragraph in a very well manner, then the rest of the paragraph becomes a chain to it. Right? So the first paragraph is the subject, means main idea presented. The second paragraph would be expanding the main idea, and the third paragraph would be means called as examples, or maybe the kind of argument that pertain to the first two paragraphs. Right? And the other paragraphs could be considered as the debate goes on. Right? And finally, it concludes, or maybe finally it gives the incontrovertible nature.